Here we are in the garden. Got some hard frost. Well, maybe not that hard, but we're getting some real cold temps. It went down to 22 last night. So the Swiss chard is still growing fine. Here's the Three Sisters garden. Look at this. The cold temperature did that to it, but this plant is definitely very much still alive. So let's go over some things. This is where all the jewelweed was planted, and they went and they busted their seeds all over it. So I expect seedlings next year. And then I just pushed all of that back up into there. So that should be busting with seedlings too next year. So all the pumpkin vines and the squash vines are pretty much killed, it looks like, or not doing too good. But for the corn and the beans, I guess I gotta let that dry out. But the corn, I think the corn is good. Corn is good to harvest. So what I'm noticing is, if you remember, I staggered. We got 2 different varieties of beans and 2 different varieties of corn. So these beans went nuts, and the other beans, well, they're there, but not quite as apparent as these. And there were differences in the way the corn grew too, so we'll compare all the results eventually. My Georgia roaster squash is like soft. Get that off there. Yeah, my squashes went like soft because of this. Morning glory and moonflower vines have died. But it's worth mentioning that if these were planted earlier in the season, they would have grown all the way up that tree. We'll try to keep them, but they're like 8 feet tall right now, so all I'm do is cut them down and dig them up. My biggest pumpkin looks like a rotten pepper. My fancy celosia, have to take that and shake that, get some seeds. There's an example of jewelweed. I'm just gonna pat that down, so a whole bunch of seedlings will come out of that next season. Here are the harvested Three Sisters garden. You see plant material for compost. The Swiss chard is growing strong. Here's the harvest. Oh, planted too late. As you can see, there's 2 distinct varieties of beans and corn in each grouping. The only squash worth mentioning is the Georgia roaster and the summer yellow. And none of the pumpkins or squashes or any of that are alive now. But some of the herbs are going really good. Like basil, here came up and died. We got cilantro, doesn't care about the cold. Dill, doesn't care. It's like might be marjoram. Parsley and sage. I kept all the flower heads of the fasciated celosia and a few of the roots to see if I can regrow them. So here we have our celosia. This is the traditional forest fire celosia flower head. And these here are all examples of the fasciated flower head. And this is the only plants I'm saving seeds from were the ones that showed signs of fasciation. And the seeds will be down in this material. Surprisingly, there was very few. So I'm hoping a lot of the seeds dropped into the area where the plants were growing and may volunteer and grow up on their own in the spring. But let's see what we got here. All right, so it's all separated out. 17 seeds. Trail of Tears bean. Glass gem corn. Turkey gizzard bean. Painted mountain corn. Each mound was planted with 6 beans and 6 corn. I've already examined all of this stuff and eaten both varieties of beans. It is important to note that none of the glass gem corn grew to complete maturity, and some of the painted mountain corn grew to maturity. Far less of the Trail of Tears bean grew to maturity than the turkey gizzard bean, which generally grew to maturity. You could see mature Trail of Tears beans and a variety of immature ones. You can see mature enough that I'm going to replant 9 of these turkey gizzard beans and a variety of immature turkey gizzard beans. And I'm going to eat today these variety of immature Trail of Tears beans, which resemble general green beans. And then I'm also going to eat this variety of somewhat immature turkey gizzard beans, which more or less resemble snow peas. And differences, aside from a greater yield with the turkey gizzard bean, would be the moisture level of the turkey gizzard bean is generally higher than the moisture level of the Trail of Tears bean. The pods both have like a little strip when you take off the stem to peel off of there, but the pods of the turkey gizzard bean remain more soft and edible for longer, while the Trail of Tears bean, the pods begin to get dried out and hard sooner. And you can see there's obvious size differences here. Now, in terms of the 2 corns, the glass gem has a more uniform kernel to it, and a smaller kernel, whereas the kernels of the painted mountain corn almost have more of like a less refined and more feral appearance. Some of them even have the very random kernel pattern on the ear, where generally they have the nice straight kernel pattern. None of the beautiful colors of the glass gem came out because both of the ears are very immature. And I mentioned earlier that the stalks of the glass gem grow more lush and beautiful than the more thin-looking, leggy-looking, yet more reddish in color sometimes, stalks of the painted mountain corn. Just if this was all planted in late July, around July 23rd, if this glass gem had been given more time, I might prefer it over the painted mountain corn. I don't know. I have to study the two corns more. But this will be my at least third harvest of painted mountain corn. So let's talk about the painted mountain corn a little bit more. We have a few color variations. You see this one here? It's like got a beautiful red stalk on it. This is kind of a plain, almost a yellowish, pale yellow. This one here starts off with these red kernels, but then they almost pop into their maturity and lighten up with just a splash of color. This one here, again, somewhat immature, but they're like a creamy color with a splash of color in the middle. We've seen one kind of like that before. Starts out red and then pops into a creamy color with a splash of red. This one here stayed red, even when they pop. Now, something I want to note is that even in terms of eating it as baby corn, like you've had that in like Chinese food maybe, I would say the glass gem would even be preferable over the painted mountain corn for a baby corn, because if you look at the ears, they're starting to plump up, even though these two ears are basically the same size. You can see that this would be more of what you'd expect from a baby corn. I'll try eating it like that, in fact. So yeah, I'm gonna eat these beans, eat those beans, plant these beans, because I think right now I'm developing not only a taste and growing preference for the turkey gizzard bean. I think I'm probably gonna keep growing that and not grow the Trail of Tears bean anymore. So just to recap, I can't determine which variety of corn I prefer. I've been pretty successful with the painted mountain corn, learning to grow with that, and it is beautiful. The glass gem was also starting to be quite beautiful. I got these turkey gizzard beans to plant right now, and I'm saving these turkey gizzard beans to dry out and replant later. So here is the grand conclusion. In terms of growing and beauty, painted mountain corn grow for me 2 seasons now. Here's the original picture of what the kernels look like. Here's my first grow kernels, my second grow ears. Now there is a reduction of color variety. You see more variety of the colors from last year. Maybe this is because it just that's what grew out of my limitations this year. Maybe I would have had more. Maybe some of the other colors took longer to grow. Kind of like the glass gem corn took longer to grow. I was unsuccessful in growing any of that to maturity. But here's an actual example along with picture of the glass gem corn. You can see when you compare the two kernels, the painted mountain and the glass gem are equally beautiful. So, painted mountain corn, clear winner in the trial. Now, between the Trail of Tears bean and a turkey gizzard bean. Turkey gizzard was a clear winner to me. And something I also like is it's more of a full-bodied bean. See how they're like round and, well, more round-ish, and these are almost kind of like flattish, smaller type of a bean when they're dried. Said we're gonna go and plant some of these right now. It's hard to compare the quality of the corn, although before I packed it back up, I would like to add that much like the thinner bean compared between the two, the glass jam is also a thinner kernel than the painted mountain corn. Painted mountain corn had a more roundish and fuller kernel than the glass jam. You know those stalks were so pretty on the glass jam. So let's go plant these beans here. Oh, here's 6 moonflower vines, 6 morning glory vines, and 4 celosia with the fasciated flower heads that I'm attempting to save. And we'll put 3 beans in there. A beefsteak tomato plant. I got 1 tomato that's looking good and 1 tomato that's self-destructing. So we got another special plant in there attempting to regrow, but we're gonna plant 3 of these seeds, beans in here. Over here we have the most successful cherry tomato transplant that I grew. Brought in from the yard, like the only successful one, and the last 3 beans will go in there.
This may not be the best lighting, but when you look at it, there is still variety, even among this small sample of painted mountain corn. You know, this is some beautiful corn. And I've heard it's some of the most versatile. Like, you can eat it fresh, it's a little sweet, it's open pollinated. You can dry it and grind it as cornmeal, make flour. I heard maybe you can pop it. It grows at high altitude. The story behind it is it was grown by a bunch of collected Native American varieties by a guy out in Montana. One guy, and he just selectively bred it. So it's fast growing, drought tolerant, cold tolerant, altitude growing, painted, beautiful mountain corn. And this variety here, turkey gizzard bean, pole bean, is also one guy. He hunted a turkey, and when he cut open the gizzard, he found these 2 beans. And from those 2 beans, my beans came. And like all from those 2 beans, anytime you get this variety, turkey gizzard pole bean was saved from some bean the turkey found delicious. And the one guy saved and grew it.
So thanks for watching another one of Digger's gardening experiments. I gotta redo these grow systems, change the substrate out. And one last thing, one more experiment for the road. These are my lettuce trees growing in wood shavings. I don't know if they're gonna grow. I mean, they got destroyed by the weather, not quite, but the woodchucks and stuff eating them. So anyway, they became like these tree things. They're like they remind me of collards. Will they grow or no? Show you grow challenge. Take care.